Hi everyone. So this week we're going to go over compare and contrast. If my PowerPoint will advance. There we go. Okay, so first we have our grammar blurb, than versus then. THAN is used for comparison. So he is taller than me. I prefer this school is better than that one. Then THEN is used to discuss progressions of time. So I did this, then I did that. You want to make sure you use the correct one so that way when you're writing, it makes sense when you're comparing things or when you are using a progression of time. Now, apostrophes we use to show possession. So if the thing following the apostrophe could be said of the previous word, then we need the apostrophe to show possession. So for example, we have a woman's hat. We could say the hat of the woman, so we can say a woman's hat. The boss's wife, we can say the wife of the boss, so we can shorten it to the boss's wife. The house of Mrs. Chang's house. Sorry about the dog. So you get the point. If it to show possession. If you can't say it and it doesn't make sense, then you have just a plural noun. So like ran of the boys, we can't say the boys ran. We just need a plural boys. Now, many common nouns end in the letter S, so it's conflicting about showing where to put the apostrophe. In most cases, it's just easier to, if it's a singular noun, add the apostrophe and add the S. So we'll get to adding the S and the apostrophe in just a minute. We want to make sure that we don't use an apostrophe to make a name plural. It's the same thing as making a noun plural. We wouldn't say the boys are here because of that possessive. We would say the boys are here without the apostrophe. The same thing with the Wilsons are here. We don't want to use that apostrophe. If we have a compound noun, we put the apostrophe at the end of the word. So my mother-in-law's hat instead of my mother's-in-law hat. And if two people possess the same item, we put the apostrophe and S after the second name only. So Maribel's and my home. His and Maribel's home. Maribel's and your home. Because we're both possessing the same thing. If they're not co-owners and they have separate things, so Caesar's and Maribel's homes are both lovely, they don't own the home jointly, so in that case we need individual apostrophe S. Use an apostrophe with contractions, but as you've learned by now, you should write out contractions when you are formal writing. So instead of can't, cannot, you'd, you would, should've, should have. Some things are different. Rock and roll, you can't really show out the right way. It's written the way that it is. Many writers and editors prefer an apostrophe after single capitalized letters. With groups of two or more letters, it's less necessary. The same thing with decades. You can write it with the apostrophe or without the apostrophe. Just make sure that you don't have this awkward apostrophe before and apostrophe after, whichever you decide to do. Amount of time or money are sometimes used as possessive adjectives that require apostrophes. So 3 days leave, the leave of 3 days. So using that of the still applies in this case. The worth of my 2 cents, 2 cents worth. Personal pronouns don't use an apostrophe. We discussed this when we talked about pronouns. When an apostrophe comes before a word or a number, take care that it's truly an apostrophe rather than a single quotation mark. So the idea is when we have a quote within a quote, that is the case where we're going to have where you're quoting someone and they're quoting someone else. So you start with the double quotations to show this is the quote that I'm quoting. Then when we get to the part where it's quoting the article you choose or the person you're quoting is quoting someone else, if we put those double quotation marks again, it makes it confusing. So we use the single quotation marks, which are the apostrophe in this case, around it to show that this person is quoting someone else. So you want to make sure that it's being used as an apostrophe and not as a quote. Serious writers avoid the word till as an alternative to until. You want to make sure that you're doing it that way. And you do not use till. That means that you are tilling the ground, you're breaking up earth. You want to make sure you're using until when you're talking. Sometimes there are false positives, possessives, which often occur with nouns ending in s. Don't add apostrophes to noun-derived adjectives ending in s. Close analysis is the best guide. So I like that Beatles song. We could technically say the song of the Beatles, but in this case we're using it as an adjective modifying which song. So in this case we don't need the apostrophe. Beware of nouns ending in y. Don't show possession by changing the y to ies. So if you're saying singular, the company's policy, we don't want to change it to plural because now you're saying the policy of many companies. All right. So now how do we actually add our apostrophe? Let me bring up a Word document here. So it's really easy if you think about first what noun you want to make possessive. If you want to make it singular or plural. So if we have the boy, boys, woman, women, child, children. So here we have singular and plural of both regular nouns and irregular nouns. So now I know, okay, I want to make them possessive. So the first thing I do is add my apostrophe to each word. Then I analyze. This is singular, I need an S. Now I have the singular boys item. This is plural already with an S, so I don't need to add an S. So it's plural, meaning the thing belongs to several boys. Woman, it's singular, so we need to add that S. Women is already plural, but since it doesn't end in S, we need to add the S. Child is singular. And same with children, it's irregular. It doesn't end in S in the plural, but it's already plural, so we add the S here. You would never want to write a sentence with the word children's like this because children is already plural, so it's incorrect writing it that way. Now, what it was saying with ones that end in S already and they're singular. So like the name Jesus. If we're going to say Jesus's mom, Mary. In this case, Jesus is singular and it ends in S. So technically, we could write it without the S and it would still make complete sense. But it's better to add the S there to show that it's singular and not showing multiple people. So we do Jesus apostrophe S, mom, Mary. Okay. Next is dangling and misplaced modifiers. If I can, there we go. Okay, so a misplaced modifier is a word, phrase, or clause that is improperly separated from the word it modifies or describes. So most times we're not going to have like the example, on her way home, Jan found a gold man's watch. But you want to make sure that the adjective you're using is with the appropriate noun. So, man's gold watch. There are several kinds. We have misplaced adjectives, which can happen. So, the child ate a cold dish of cereal for breakfast this morning. We mean that the cereal is cold, not the dish. So, we want to make sure to put the adjective with the correct noun. The same thing, the torn student's book lay on the desk. That makes it sound like the student is torn up rather than the book itself. Adverbs matter. So only, just, those kinds of adverbs, we want to make sure they're in the right place with what they're modifying, because it changes the meaning of the sentence. So if we have just John was picked to host the program, or only John was picked to host the program, that means that he was picked, no one else. But if we change it to John was just picked to host the program, then in that case, it means he was just picked now. John was picked to host just the program, means he's hosting only the program, nothing else. Only is another word like that, where depending on where you put it in the sentence can change the meaning of the overall sentence. So you want to make sure it's in the right place. Misplacing an adverb. So we slowly ate the lunch that we had brought. You're describing how you ate. But if we ate the lunch that we had brought slowly, it makes it sound like you brought your lunch slowly instead of eating it slowly. Only, like I said, is another one of those ones. We'd also have misplaced phrases. So the dealer sold the Cadillac to the buyer with leather seats. In this case, we have with leather seats is our misplaced phrase. And it makes it sound like the buyer has leather seats when we mean the Cadillac does. So it'd be better to say the dealer sold the Cadillac with leather seats to the buyer. All right. Misplaced clauses can be the same way. The waiter served a dinner roll to the woman that was well buttered. The woman is not well buttered, the roll is. So we want to say the waiter served a dinner roll that was well buttered to the woman. So you want to make sure your clauses and your phrases are all in the right place. The teacher said on Monday she would return our essays. Did the teacher say this on Monday, or will she return the essays on Monday? So it said she would return our essays on Monday. We want to make sure it's with the correct area. So you want to make sure that when you're correcting it, you don't put it in the wrong place. So if you meant that on Monday she said this, you can say on Monday the teacher said she would return our essays. Now, dangling modifiers is a phrase or clause that is not clearly and logically related to the word or word it modifies, i.e. that it is placed next to. So, unlike a misplaced modifier, a dangling modifier can't be corrected by simply moving it to a different place in a sentence. And usually it's at the beginning of the sentence, although it can sometimes come at the end. The idea is that if we say looking towards the west, a funnel-shaped cloud stirred up dust. In this case, it makes it sound like the funnel is looking toward the west, when in reality, we mean a person is looking toward the west. Now, although it's clear what we mean, and that we don't obviously mean the funnel is looking toward the west, sometimes it can get kind of mistaken. So we want to make sure that we put it in the right place. So, for example, when 9 years old, my mother enrolled in medical school. We know probably mother didn't enroll in medical school at 9 years old, but we want to make sure we put when I was 9 years old, my mother enrolled in medical school. Or when 9 years old, I watched my mother enroll in medical school. The same thing, walking to the movies, the cloudburst drenched Jim. Walking to the movies, Jim was drenched by the cloudburst would work better. Having been fixed the night before, Priscilla could use the car. The car could be used by Priscilla because we want to make sure that it's in the right place. So, looking toward the west, I saw a funnel-shaped cloud. Jim was drenched by the cloudburst. when I was 9 years old, my mother enrolled in medical school. Since the car had been fixed the night before, Priscilla could use it, or you could do having been fixed the night before, the car could be used by Priscilla. You have different options for changing it, but you want to make sure that whatever, whoever, or whatever it is you mean for that dangling modifier is next to the dangling modifier in some way, so we know exactly who it is you're talking about. Okay. So compare and contrast. What is the purpose? Why do we do it? So we do it to impose meaning on our experiences and also to make choices. So our writer's purpose could be used to inform or persuade. So it could be to inform someone that one thing is better than another, that things that seem different are actually alike, or that things that seem alike are actually different. But we can also do where we're persuading someone to understand that one thing is better than another, that some things are that seem different are actually alike, etc. And that imposes meaning on our experiences, but it also helps people make choices. So we use compare and contrast every single day. Am I going to eat an apple or a banana? Am I going to do this or that? Am I going to go to this school or that school? And you think about the individual qualities of the two choices that you're going to make in order to make that choice. Now, usually we don't sit there and list all of all of the aspects of those two choices and then come up with it, but in a compare and contrast essay we would. So in pre-writing, we want to make sure our subjects should be at least somewhat alike. If they're not alike to each other, then it's going to be difficult finding any form of comparison. You can find a lot of contrasting things, but you won't be able to find any comparison. You want to keep focused on your purpose. So if you are trying to persuade someone that one school is better than another, then you want to make sure that you're saying all of the good that one school does compared to the other school. You want to make sure that if you're informing, you show both sides, so the good and the bad. The same way that we said with dominant impressions, that if you're trying to convince someone that a place is the best place ever, you wouldn't use as much about the negatives. You wouldn't focus on the negatives, you'd focus on the positives. And it's the same way here. Now, your thesis should identify 2 or more items being compared and whether you are covering the differences, similarities, or both. So I could have this school is similar to this school is different than this school, or say both. Looking at, I'm going to compare and contrast the two schools for their differences and similarities. So you want to make sure your thesis states what 2 items it is and whether they're being compared, whether you're covering differences, similarities, or both. So if we had a correct thesis statement using the same example of the colleges, we could say Polk State is similar to Kaiser University in student life, in finances, in course selection. Or we could say Kaiser University and Polk State College are different in those 3 areas. Or we could say that Kaiser University and Polk State College have many similarities and differences in those 3 areas. So you still want to think about what 3 areas you're going to talk about, depending on how you want to set up and organize your writing. So the first thing we do in the pre-writing is start by thinking about all of the similarities and differences, or just the similarities or just the differences, and write those out so we can see kind of the 2 choices on what we're going to do. Then we want to think about our organization. So if we're going to do it point by point, then we need to put those 3 points into our thesis statement. So for example, if using the same example that we've been, If we want to talk about price, student life, and course availability, then we would talk about both colleges' prices in one paragraph, a second paragraph to talk about both colleges' student life, and a third paragraph to talk about both colleges' course availability. So in this case, we're talking about both colleges at the same time, how they're similar and or different on these 3 points. But we can also do it side by side and say that that PSC and Kaiser have many differences or have many similarities or have many similarities and differences between them, and then goes point by point. So body 1 could be PSC. We talk about its price, its student life, and course availability. So we talk about everything that we want to talk about for PSC. Then we talk about Kaiser, talk about everything about Kaiser. Then we talk about either a third college, or we could analyze something that we didn't look at. If we, in talking about PSC and Kaiser, notice there are a lot of similarities, maybe our third body paragraph could be, these are the differences between the two schools. If we notice there are a lot of differences between price, student life, and course availability, then we would probably want our third body paragraph to talk about the similarities between both schools so that we can get it in there. So a good way to show this is on this topic of Star Trek versus Star Wars, which might seem silly to some people, but it's just a good way to show it. So here we have 2 videos that are both focused on whether Star Trek is the better series or Star Wars. So in this case, though, we have one video that shows it side by side and one video that shows it point by point. So I'm going to play each video and then I'll explain a little bit further.
I'm gonna have a lightsaber that's the weapon of an ancient religion that has organisms that live within your body.
It is a simple idea. It's the kind of idea an 8-year-old would come up with.
Phasers, lightsabers, tribbles, Minox. Look, we all enjoy a little escapism. Some seek it in grandiose space operas with giant armored monkey men, while others turn to hard-hitting sci-fi that sometimes happens to be about whales. But is one superior to the other? It's debatable.
I'm Team Star Trek.
Star Wars, the superior franchise.
I have been a Star Trek fan since I was 6 years old.
But I find Star Wars the superior series.
Star Trek is the best. Everyone knows this.
Star Wars for life.
Women in positions of power. Star Trek is a model for a more peaceful future, whereas Star Wars is just more people shooting guns at each other and wearing stupid outfits.
Star Trek happens in the real world, in the future, like a couple hundred years from now.
The word Star Wars, it's got the word wars in it. So the entire premise of the show is based on violence and fighting, where I would argue that the entirety of Star Trek is based on a construction of peace.
So everything that happens is based on our society, our technology, and how do we change? How do we evolve? How do we become who we want to be?
It's about entertainment. It's about entertainment. That's not entertaining.
It could also be about intellectual stimulation, but tomato, tomato.
In design, there's this concept called symmetry. It's beautiful. If you look at this, does that look symmetric to you at all? Look, I got this floppy DirecTV dish up here, and I got the one way you can see out the window right here. Compare that to this beautiful symmetrical ship.
And this is just so symmetrical and so basic. With this, you got Han Solo's character.
Star Trek paints a world where everybody is in one of these. Like everyone's in a goddamn Prius. The Millennium Falcon, that thing's fucking falling apart. That reminds me of my 91 Toyota Camry.
What are those for?
It's aerodynamic.
So is this.
This kind of looks like a flying saucer. This is progressive.
You want to tell me that this does not look like a flying saucer? You could literally put a cup of tea on top of that thing and use it as a saucer.
Star Trek is so alienating in how perfect and distant it is. It is, if anything, a pipe dream of what humanity can be, and Star Wars is a reflection of our true complex nature.
I think that's bullshit.
I don't know. Does Star Trek have Jar Jar Binks?
What's wrong with Jar Jar Binks? Who doesn't fucking love Jar Jar Binks?
Star Trek, it is best enjoyed after you've graduated with a liberal arts degree. Star Wars is a place for imagination and youth to enjoy something and to get wrapped up in a hero's tale.
Star Wars is a childish tale of black versus white, good versus evil, another stupid hero trope. Like, we need more of that crap.
I guess we could delve into the sexy factor. I mean, Carrie Fisher in the bikini. I mean, we've got to go with that.
What do you
have in Star Trek?
Every alien Kirk ever slept with, which is half of the aliens in the galaxy. You have William Shatner in his prime.
But Han Solo, I mean, is there a sexier guy than that? I mean, he's a man's man, you know?
What's the deal with CP30, C3PO?
You know his name.
You need a translator for Chewbacca, you need a translator for R2-D2. Those aliens are so thin, they can't even speak for themselves.
About a franchise that was built for entertainment, for people to buy tickets to go to movies or watch TV at home for them to be entertained. Of course I'm gonna get fired up about it. If we were talking about something like climate change, sure, we can have a rational discussion and sit here and discuss it.
You could be Luke Skywalker and have a laser sword and be like a space samurai. That sounds like super fun.
I can't respect people who like are Star Wars fans over Star Trek. It's nuts to me.
Look at how many iconic things that it's done. The best villain, and not to mention like the best movie lines. Luke, I am your father. Everybody knows where that comes from.
But that's the thing, you know, it's fantasy. You're in this world where stuff is just amazing.
Do you want to use the Force or live long and prosper? I hope that you live long and prosper to come to the right decision.
I just feel like we're never gonna see eye to eye. And
Okay, so with this one, we see the side by side in that they talk about Star Trek first, all the good and all the bad. Then they talk about all the positive and negatives of Star Wars. And then in their closing arguments, we see they talk about both and talk about some of the things with both of them. So that's what I mean by side by side. Now, point by point, you'll notice in this next video is that when they bring up a point, they talk about Star Wars and Star Trek for that one point, and then move on to the next point.
Captain, we're caught in some kind of tractor beam.
Open a channel!
I sense a presence I've not felt in a long time. Nerds!
Ah, you again. Look, we're not nerds. If we're nerds, you're nerds.
Yeah, right. I'm a Sith Lord, and you're a bald guy in pajamas. Can you do this?
No, because that doesn't make any sense. If people can do that, why does anyone have a gun?
Oh, because you have to have the reflexes of a Force Master?
Oh, so you have to be magic then. That's dumb.
Oh, okay, the Force is dumb, but you beaming people all over the place isn't.
It's science! We convert a person or object into an energy pattern through a process called demon.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, pack your dialogue with bullshit pseudoscience.
We don't do that!
Sir, we cannot compensate for the gravimetric interference.
Not now, Geordie.
Oh, I feel like I'm in science class, but I'm getting dumber.
You want to talk about pseudoscience? Midichlorians, then.
That doesn't count.
How about politics? The Galactic Senate, then.
Doesn't count either.
Oh, great. So tell me, what does count as Star Wars?
The Clone Wars cartoon and the original 3 movies. Except the Ewoks. They're done. Oh, yeah, hilarious. Almost as hilarious as Star Trek V.
We don't speak of the odd-numbered Star Trek movies.
That's weird, because it seems like all you do is talk.
Your simple shoot-'em-up mind just can't handle these complex, nuanced issues.
Boring. Oh, yeah, your stuff is so nuanced. Be nice to Data and don't be racist to aliens. There, I solved Star Trek.
It's far more intelligent than your dark side, light side nonsense. Star Wars is like philosophy for children.
Yeah, sorry, we have to keep it simple to, move the plot along and have some action.
Star Trek has plenty of action.
Captain, will you be attending my poetry reading later?
God, Data, seriously.
The only strong Star Trek character gets his ass kicked all the time.
Enough! I won't sit here any longer and be insulted! Ah!
Oh man, the Force rules! Oh, Worf sucks so bad.
Yes, very funny, Lord Vader, but I'm afraid that while you were prattling on, we were collecting valuable information about your space station and have detected a weakness. Target the exhaust port. Fire photon torpedoes.
Photon torpedoes? What are those, like geek-ass proton torpedoes? Your special effects are lame.
That's not the point!
Yes, it is.
So as you can see, they talk about each point by point about both sides. So where Star Trek and Star Wars both talk about science, where they both talk about special effects, when they both talk about these different things, they talk about both sides point by point. So as a way to practice, usually in class, I would have people tell me what are some of the good and bad about Apple phones versus the good and bad about Android phones. And then we could see, based on all the good things about Apple and all the good things about Android, we could compare and contrast those two in order to inform. We could say all the good about Apple and bad about Android in order to persuade, or vice versa. We have the ability to show either point by point. So we could go by price, by features, by durability, or we could go, here's all the good about Apple, here's all the good about Android, and write it that way. The same thing with two sports. If we wanted to say, compare baseball and football to one another, we could say everything about baseball and then everything about football, and then a paragraph showing where they're similar to each other. Or we could say point by point, say that baseball and football are similar in their equipment needs or different in their equipment needs, that they are similar or different in the way the game is played, that they are similar or different in how many people are on a team. So we can do it point by point that way. Depending on the topic and how much you have will depend on which one sounds a little bit better for you to do. Okay, so for this week, for the assignment, instead of doing a full essay, you're just going to write 3 body paragraphs. So you'll have, when it comes up, you're going to pick one of the verses choices below and write 3 body paragraphs comparing and contrasting the 2 ideas in that category in 3 separate areas. So you can do it side by side or point by point, as long as you have 3 areas where they're compared or contrasted to one another. So you can do online learning versus traditional face-to-face learning, compare 2 genres of music, your favorite book versus its movie adaptation, 2 movies, your family's culture and heritage compared to, say, American culture, 2 sports compared to one another, or comparing 2 famous people to one another. So I want you to focus on one of these. If you have another idea for compare and contrast, email me and let me know, and we can discuss it on whether you do a different topic, but these ones will give you some ideas on what to write about. Your thesis statement is still going to need to be in there. It'll be your first sentence of your first paragraph, or you can do it as a separate sentence altogether and practice with the thesis statement. The key thing I want you to practice on in the body paragraphs is, if you start side by side, you stay side by side. If you start point by point, you stay point by point. You don't want to switch between the 2 organizational styles, because then it makes it confusing. So if you have any questions, please email me and let me know. And if not, I will see you all next week. Have a great week.